Welcome to the Confessional Close-Up. My name is Christine CISNEROZ, and I'm so pleased that you are joining me here. The title of today's episode is Tightrope. It seems like every time I turn around, it's a little difficult to multitask in attention and pay attention to so many different things that are developing, ways in which the cabal is pulling out all of the stops and putting into our world the symbols, the signals, all of the ways that the archonic energy has been trolling along and infecting humanity with so much of what we have seen in ideology and the true pathogens, which are the spiritual pathogens of your free will being taken over. And actually, I think probably the worst pathogen of all is that you are not entitled to your free will, that you aren't entitled to your soul. Now, we've had some lighter shades of that leading up to this. Anything from you can't say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, or you can't mention God, or you can't have prayer in school, to the frowning upon saying Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving. What we know is that this has been going on for quite a while. In fact, I remember this as clear as day. There was a moment about 5 or 6 years ago when I was walking into my bank to cash a check. And when I got to the door to go inside, I saw that there was a sign on the door that said the bank would be closed on Monday because of Indigenous People Day. It was a national holiday, Indigenous People Day. Now, I grew up most of my childhood as a Jehovah's Witness, so sometimes I accept that I'm a little bit remiss about certain holidays or knowing all the details. But it seemed to me that I would have noticed something like Indigenous People Day. So when I got inside the bank, I asked one of the tellers, I don't understand the Indigenous People Day. Could you explain it to me? All the while I'm standing there, I realized that it's actually around that time of the year for Columbus Day. Now, it's no secret that in Seattle, sometimes when you walk into a store, a bakery, a restaurant, a bank, sometimes even a church, that it could be a little chilly. People could be a little bit distant. That's why it's not hard for Seattleites to distance, because we've been doing it so long, and we've been accepting that it's what we do. We distance ourselves from everything, from everyone, in every situation. The sentiment here usually is something like, if I give you more money, will you go away? If I pay more taxes, can I ignore the problem? This has been going on for decades, but just like any city that's been ruled by Democrats for decades, you'll find that sentiment aplenty. In any case, it was a little chilly in there, especially when I asked, what is Indigenous People Day? I thought it was Columbus Day. Now, mind you, I am part Cherokee, and I don't mean in that Elizabeth Warren sort of way. I really am part Cherokee. I'm Italian, I'm French, I'm Mexican, I'm Spanish, and I'm a little bit Cherokee. I know what you might be thinking. I'm a little bit country, I'm a little bit rock and roll. But it's true. I am a little bit Cherokee. And as a Cherokee, partially, I had never heard of Indigenous People Day. And in fact, as an Indigenous person, partially, I didn't understand why this was on the door instead of Columbus Day. What I was met with was an explanation about how Washington State had won the battle, quote, to change Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day. That's right. Never mind that not a single person at the bank, nor in the Whole Foods across the way or the adjacent yoga studio, would have ever even heard of Indigenous people had it not been for Christopher Columbus. At least not the Indigenous people that we were supposedly talking about. And no, again, I don't mean Elizabeth Warren. When I took issue with the established national holiday being taken over by something that was straight out of the book of white guilt, I was met with tiny eyes, tightening mouths, and a chilly, if not Arctic, transaction. I was never treated the same after that at that bank, after Indigenous People Day. I have heard through historians upon occasion that if the Nazis had been stopped, if Hitler had been stopped in Poland, then World War II would have been drastically different. It would have at least been shortened, and more lives would have been spared. It seems almost like an unfair comparison. However, When you consider that a Trump supporter was executed in Portland just a few days ago for backing someone and voting for someone, for wanting to support someone who has been mercilessly punished for doing good for our country, what it leaves you with is a keen sense of how those who are demonstrating themselves as domestic terrorists in our country will not be satisfied with even the post-birth abortion that they have successfully passed in some states, but for indeed the aborting of your future. And I don't say this lightly. This is not hyperbolic. There is a bloodthirst that is so palpable on our streets today and in our places where we shop and the places that we go to either buy supplies or have a bite to eat. What has been termed as the cancel culture that we are living in isn't just a canceling of the culture, it's a canceling of you. What I find is that there is also this sentiment of not just wanting to abort babies, but to actually do away with life. And the absolute anger and temper tantrums that are being thrown because life is not being done away with has led to an even darker agenda that seems to be something like, since we can't kill life, we'll settle for you. And as the Chinese government unmasks itself, revealing quite possibly the largest perpetrator of terror, illness, destruction, and death, we must remember that fear begets fear. And though China works so incredibly hard to be the biggest purveyor of fear, China ultimately fears the fear that we do not have for their government and their dictators in control. There is much talk about the masks being a slide, sort of an initiation into having you accept the vaccine, perhaps even begging for it. There is much talk about these masks being a way to soft target you. And I would say that it's also a way to create a soft target out of you. You are being targeted and you are being softened so that the soft targeting of you is really easy. The conditioning of you, the conditioning of your immune system, and the conditioning of your spiritual immune system so that you are not problematic when it comes to harvesting you as either a battery or as a coffin filler. As the statistics come and go, the lasting impressions of fear through the media medusa and the solidifying of these masks into muzzles are attempting to lead not to the silent majority, but the silenced majority. At first shaming you, at next masking you, and then muzzling you, and then creating your either demise or obedience, not through a muzzle on your mouth or your face, but through the muzzle of the gun that they hold to your head. As with most things, middle management, particularly on the lower rungs, seem to always become the most brutal and the most lethal when given even a small amount of control over the lives of others. The tightrope employed vacillates between the threat of stagnancy and repetitive suffering and the seduction and comfort of the familiar, even so far as claiming to be family, quote, getting through this together, all the while attempting to replace your eternal and intrinsic wisdom with the multitude of promises of utopia accomplished by unity through diversity. In these situations, when we look at what is diverse, what we find is that there is no option to create choices. There are only choices that you must choose from in the, quote, diverse panel of what is sold to you as the only possibilities. And indeed, as we move along in this realm of those who walk in fear outside with masks and ride bicycles with masks, I saw some children even playing in a playground with plenty of space with masks on. These stark visions in a horror movie that exists around us, as we find it so hard to speak to those who unquestioningly comply with their own slow demise. This is perhaps One of the more problematic moments, as we see the ark door is half closed. Not that we would work to ban anyone from their own good, but because the hour is late, and there are those who would be Esau instead of Jacob, trading in for what they are afraid they won't have, for that which is their God-given birthright. Today, as I was thrown out of a store for not wearing a mask and not, quote, complying, the hard truth that I realized wasn't about how hard it was to lose the relationship with a store I had been shopping at for decades, but to come to the realization of what that store actually was, an accomplice and a purveyor of fear. These moments, when the light is brighter than ever, we are going to see things and we are going to experience things that we simply do not want to see or go through. Undoubtedly, this is the truth, but we must take heart, because everything that we are seeing around us, that we are not in calibration with, that we are not obedient to, that we are not in compliance with the death of humanity and the death of the soul, is going to create a reaction to us. And in that reaction, we must rejoice, because this is like getting the receipt from the store that you can't shop in. This is perhaps the most important signature, because this is your signature for what you know is right. Remain aware, Patriots, as I know you will, for these pathogens and these infections, these parasitics, which have now in some ways become the hosts, might increase in number, but I would wager perhaps would only increase in visibility as the light becomes brighter and brighter, and through these symbols of fear, wherein we find the unmasking of who's who in this war. It is not a small thing when we are punished for doing what is right, when we are ostracized for doing what is good, and yet we know on the tightrope that we walk, that we must never look down longingly or look back like Lot's wife to all of the empty promises that have cost us liberty, lives, but because of our faith, our trust, and our fight will never cost us our souls. We must always remember that they will never spare any expense, because as their fear drives them, their horror has been realized, as they do not control us. They do not control life, and they no longer control appearing as if they are God. The insult of the devil is never heard in heaven. And on this high tightrope, we are not abandoned, and we are truly bonded to each other in this most epic moment for the highest purpose in all of humanity. We are loved, we will be guided, we will be shown, and we will cross this tightrope with our souls intact. Until next time, Patriot, God bless you, God bless our President, Donald J. Trump, and God bless the United States of America.